Got 1 minute to go, but I'm gonna go ahead and start the webinar.
Yep.
David, you did in Charlotte.
What's that?
I was asking David if he's sitting in Charlotte.
Oh, thought about it.
Mom and Dad got their tickets.
You probably won't either.
All
All right, Chris at 7. Should I do it?
Yes, sir. We are live on YouTube and live on Zoom.
Okay, this is the call to order of the December 11th, 2024 meeting of the Rockbridge County Planning Commission. Roll call, Commission Member Sabrizi.
Here.
Commission Member Kramer.
Here.
Commission Member Sandridge.
Here.
Commission Member Whitmore.
Here.
Commission Member Beebe is here. I'll read the important notices. In addition to citizens attending the meeting in person, citizens have several options to view or participate in the Zoom meeting webinar as described below. We will do our best to take citizen comment remotely. There are 2 options for citizens to offer comment. To join the Rockbridge County Planning Commission Zoom webinar, the link is available on the county website to copy into the address line on your browser. To join by telephone, you may dial into one of the numbers listed on the county website. Webinar ID and password are there for your convenience. Citizens wishing to simply view the meeting live or after the fact can do so on the Rockbridge County Planning Commission YouTube channel, also available on the county website. If you wish to make a citizen comment as a Zoom meeting participant, you will use the raise your hand feature. You can press the raise hand button on the bottom of your Zoom window or press *9 if you are calling in by telephone. At this time, we will proceed with the meeting. Citizen comments, Chris?
We have no one physically signed up to speak. Check the internet real quick. And no one online.
Okay. You all have had a chance to review the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. So moved.
In a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, board reports. Chris?
Yes, sir. At the November 25th, 2024 Board of Supervisors meeting, the Board of Supervisors approved the Warm Run Solar LLC solar project on the Huffman property. I was with some modified conditions, and so in front of y'all and as well as on the table back here, you have the final conditions as approved by the Board of Supervisors. And what I've done is the highlighted portions is what was added or modified, I should say, to the Planning Commission's recommendation. So briefly, they modified number 1 to require a essentially double row buffer on the northern property line. On the southern property line that was to be proposed to match the northern buffer as shown on the reference conceptual site plan. Number 11, they modified the hours of activity to not include some activities on Saturday and Sundays. And then finally, they added a new condition or they added a condition number 21 that had to do with a $30,000 bond for any damage to the water well on parcel number 62-12-B2. But again, they approved that as recommended by the Planning Commission with those modified conditions as highlighted in your package you have in front of you. There was no Board of Zoning Appeals meeting nor TCO meeting in November. As far as the Office of Community Development Committee meeting, they last met on the 18th of November. Primarily discussion was the Irish Creek Ag Forest District. I think I gave the Planning Commission heads up. There's a group of landowners that have made an application to create an Ag Forest District in the Irish Creek area. We did have earlier this month, we had a preliminary organizational meeting with most of the applicants, just a question and answer sort of review Ag Forest Districts question and answer type meeting. That most likely the process on Ag Forest Districts is it will go to the Agricultural and Forestal Advisory Committee. They make a recommendation to the board, and then y'all, the Planning Commission, are required to hold a public hearing and also make a recommendation to the board in normal fashion. And I'm anticipating that those processes continuing in November. Then they also talked about the past planning commission meeting. That is the Office Community Development Committee meeting, talked about the past planning commission. The next meeting is Monday, the 16th, this coming up Monday. We always meet in this room. To date, we've always met in this room. That's all the board and committee reports I had.
Okay, we'll proceed with our agenda. First item is Ronald A. and Janet K. Perkins on 1080 Maury River Road, Lexington, Virginia, 24450. This is a public hearing application for conditional zoning map amendment from the general residential R1 zoning district to the agricultural transition AT zoning district. Chris?
Yes, Mr. and Mrs. Perkins are in attendance this evening to represent the project. As stated, it's a zoning map amendment application from general residential R1 to the agricultural transitional district A2. A little bit about the zoning, current zoning in the area. The Perkins property is located on the east side of Maury River Road, consists of two parcels of land, totaling approximately 47 acres. I did, obviously, as always, we do research prior to. When I first got the application, I was assuming that this zoning district in this area along Maury River Road was developed during the conception of zoning in 1972. After looking at the old zoning maps from that time period, I realized that it was actually agricultural during the conception of zoning, but it was around 1984 that this chunk of residential zone along Maury River Road was established for the first time. So the Perkins is highlighted in magenta. The two parcels are highlighted in magenta and currently in the residential zoning district. As you can see, the three sides border the residential zoning district, but the west side is bordered by the agricultural transitional zoning district. Little details of the Perkins tract. Map shows the Perkins land holdings in the area. The holdings consist of two parcels of land, again outlined in magenta. They're identified as tax map number 62-19-A and respectively 25.44 acres per tax records. And then that was the farthest west one located with the house on it. And then the frontage is identified as 62-19-B. Consisting of 17.992 acres, again, per tax records. Excuse me, totaling 43.432 acres per tax records. As far as the existing use of the property, currently there's one single family dwelling on the property. The remainder of the property consists of approximately 5 acres of woods, one small pond, and a field that is utilized for hay production. The application itself, application is for a proposed zoning map amendment, again, to rezone the property from the general residential district R1 to the agricultural transitional district AT. The area is located within the suburban service area designation. Other factors per state law, Code of Virginia 15.2-2284, matters to be considered in drawing and applying the zoning ordinance in the district. There is, apologize on the small font there, and I'll read these more or less verbatim. There are other things to consider aside from the comprehensive plan on the rezoning application. Per that Code of Virginia, zoning ordinance and districts shall be drawn and applied with reasonable consideration for the existing use of the character of the property, the comprehensive plan as discussed, the suitability of the property for various uses or for the proposed various uses, the trends and growth or change, current and future requirements for the community as to land for various purposes determined by population and economic studies, transportation requirements for the community, requirements for airports, housing, schools, parks, playgrounds, recreational areas, and other public services, the conservation of natural resources, preservation of floodplains, the protection of life and property from impounding structural failures, the preservation of agricultural and forestal land, the conservation of properties and their values, and lastly, the encouragement of the most appropriate land uses throughout the locality. That concludes my brief presentation, but I would like to turn it over to the Perkins family to review the application and answer any questions the Planning Commission may have.
Thank you, Chris. First, let me express, I'm Ronald, my wife Janet, the better half, 2/3. Let me express my appreciation to you for allowing us this opportunity to try to make our case for making the zoning change from residential to agricultural. The purpose of why we would like to do this is because we think we have a unique piece of land that has beautiful views of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And I don't know if any of you have driven this part of Maury River Road. Oop, the map isn't there anymore, but it would be a lot better looking than me. There's 1,000 feet of frontage. It's an unimpeded view of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And we would like to pass that on in posterity to future generations. We've enjoyed it for all the years that we've had it. We have no intentions of doing anything with it. So to that end, we contacted conservation partners here in Lexington, and they put us in touch with the Shenandoah Valley Conservancy, who sent someone down to see us, and they did a reconnaissance of the property. And they, in fact, and this may be putting the cart before the horse, especially after talking to Chris today, they actually, their board has voted to accept our grant of a conservation easement, obviously contingent upon the fact that it has to be agricultural, they don't take residential land, and it has to be obviously in compliance with the Rockbridge County comprehensive plan. But that has already been approved. And I think the other thing that I'd like to point out is that if we are able to get your approval and do this, this falls within one of the goals that I have read in the comprehensive plan on page 75. The goal is to protect and preserve the scenic beauty and environmental quality of the county. And strategy number 9 is the scenic quality of the county's road corridors should be preserved through available programs and legislation. And that conservation easement legislation and the program that Shenandoah Valley Conservancy is part of provide the means to do that. Just to talk a little bit about the land and why we're so proud of it and why we would like to pass it on. Obviously, we're biased. We think it's a beautiful view. I've been up there working, trimming the fence line. I mean, this property is manicured to the T. And people have stopped on the highway and said, you know, you are the most beautiful property, scenic view in Rockbridge County. Now, I don't believe that. I don't, we're probably not in the top 20, but people have stopped and told us that. I don't know how many of you might be familiar with the local rural landscape artist, Ryan Russell. He spent 2 summers in our field painting. I mean, I could be guaranteed if I went up there at 6:37 in the morning, he would be there already painting sunrise in our field with hay bales in it. And he's made several paintings of our property, for which we got nothing but the privilege, the pride of him doing so. In addition to that, you're going to think I made this up, but this really tickled me. So I've got to just pull it out of the envelope here and read it, because this ended up in my mailbox last week. Someone must have seen the rezoning sign, because It says, the agricultural enterprise. I didn't know I was an agricultural
Yeah.
enterprise, but it says, the agricultural enterprise, 1080 Maury River Road. Thank you. And in here is a note. Just a quick note to thank you for having the most beautiful agricultural fields I have ever observed. Now that's really over the top. Your hay fields bordering Maury River Road are so pleasing to my psyche. I drive by each day and always have my spirits lifted by the view. So thanks. I have no idea where this came from. I'd like to thank the person. Well, it's not there again, but you'll know, I know you know the county by heart. That 1,000 feet of frontage, then in that first parcel is 100% field. And then the second parcel down below, the two together make about 30 to 35 acres of hay. And we have had that, it's in agricultural usage. And we have had local farmers cut and use that hay, cut it twice a year for the 24 years that we have owned the property. So it's definitely agricultural. And so I guess I'm guilty of not being involved in the comprehensive planning process to have come in probably 6 months ago or so and say, wait a minute, why do you consider this residential when this is agricultural? If you take from the horse center, then I know you approved changing from residential to agricultural transition for the land for, which we're very happy about, for horse stable and horse farm. Then we have Tom Stanley's sheep farm, which he uses the little piece in between the neighbors to put his sheep in their field. Then you have my property, which is agricultural. And then the next field is in hay production. And then there are a few houses on that side of the road. And then you got Mrs. Davis's livestock fields and then lazy acres. So when I look at that and I think of anybody, if I were driving that road, I would say, I'm driving through the country. This is agricultural. Of course, I wouldn't want to look to the left because that is residents on the other side of the road. So I've always thought of that just as agricultural. And so I would hope that you would be able to see your way to approve changing this property and from residential to agricultural transitional. And I know that this is only at best with your approval, the first step, because then we have to go through the second step of the comprehensive plan. So with that, I think that's all I have to add. Happy to answer any questions.
Gentlemen, questions?
I was just curious as to why the Conservancy wouldn't accept a donation of an easement with it being residential, and it has to be, I mean, that may be a legal issue. I was just curious as to why, you know,
Right.
land's
I
land.
mean, it is contingent. That you made a good point that they accepted it contingent upon it being the zoning being changed from residential, because you're absolutely right. They don't take any residential property.
Just a
So
policy they have, I guess.
their time there and their vote will have been for naught if it can't get changed to agriculture.
And I could piggyback off of that. And with that, I'm going to bear with me here. I'm going to pull it up my GIS. Couple different moving parts here. As Mr. Perkins stated. It's really it's a twofold process, and the first, well, it's either first step or second step. In a more uniform world, we would address the comprehensive plan prior to the application, but with the application in hand, it's in front of us. I'm going to share my screen and attempt to better answer that question. But prior to, it's the zoning and the SBC would prefer it being in an agricultural zoning district. But more importantly, if you will, per state code. That was weird. Let's say,
Time.
that was the YouTube talking to me. And so apologize about that. Per state code, section 10.1 -1010, it's the creation, acceptance, and duration, essentially open space and conservation easements. Number E on that section of code states that no conservation shall be valid and enforceable unless the limitations or obligations created thereby conform in all respects, and I emphasize all respects every time I read it, to the comprehensive plan at the time the easement is granted for the area in which the real property is located. So with that being said, I'd like to, at this time, I'd like to share my screen to just go over some mapping components of it. All right, so what we're looking at, well, first of all, we'll look at the zoning first and foremost. So during my presentation, we reviewed the zoning with this residential zoning district that was created in approximately 1984. At that time, it actually did go all the way, it's my understanding, it went all the way to include the Lazy Acres parcel. They have made with their equestrian facility there. It's my understanding they made an application to rezone their property from residential to agricultural. At that time, we did not have the agricultural transitional zone. But to back up a little bit, this is about 300 acres, approximately 300 acres in the residential zoning district. And then therefore, when we were doing our comprehensive plan update, this is essentially what the suburban service area looks like. So to answer David's question directly, it's the zoning and the comprehensive plan. Of course, this is in the suburban service area, and with that, all aspects of the comprehensive plan, that would include the land use designation, obviously. So what I relayed to Mr. and Mrs. Perkins this morning, and which we'll continue the conversation on, it may be advantageous for the county to amend the comprehensive plan, and a lot of localities, when they have large projects, not something like an easement, but I have talked to Taylor Evans with the SBC. I'm so used to saying Valley Conservation Council because that's what they were called for 20 some odd years. And I'm getting examples of how other similar localities have dealt with this. So that's sort of a work in progress. But one thing I could envision is, you obviously, going back to the zoning, you want to have some room for development in the future. To zoom in a little bit, the closest public water and public sewer to this area is in the Valley Pike Patrick Drive area, which is here. I think it's approximately 2,000 feet away, as the crow flies, I should say, away from the Perkins track. But what we have started preliminarily discussing with staff and others is the possibility of amending the mapping associated with the land use layer, and essentially take out, I think it's approximately 300 acres of this area here, take it out of the suburban service area, include it in the rural area, as well as vice versa with the horse center. We actually left the horse center as a rural area on the land use map. And it may be advantageous to include that portion in the suburban service area. So it would be essentially, I think it's definitely more coming out than would be going in. And that's not, to be clear, that's not to facilitate, not solely to facilitate or to facilitate the Perkins' desire to place the into an easement, but there's no plans of extending no immediate plans, nor discussed plans of extending the public water and public sewer into Maury River Road. And then also, we are aware this has generated a fair amount of discussion. That's pretty cool. You got that letter, because that was the response we got from most of the phone calls we got. But it also has facilitated other discussions in the area, which were not uncommon on residential zones like this, to say, hey, I may want to rezone my property. Obviously across the road is residential. Most of those houses were built, prior to 84. Let's put it that way. But when you look at some restrictive covenants and this, I think it's the Woodlots, Woodland subdivision, bear with me here, Woodridge subdivision, weirdly enough. They do have restrictive covenants that it can't be further subdivided. We heard that from the Godfreys as well. And so restrictive covenants can be amended, but if you look at the actual topography, I'm gonna put on my 25% slope map. You can see essentially why the Wood Ridge subdivision was developed in the manner that it was. The white on the map, if you will, this area is 25% slope or greater. And so the development potential for residential development is severely limited to that area. With that being said, I've also said throughout the day and yesterday, last week, if you will, that of course the creation of the horse center has not only had influence on the value of the property in that area, but also the use of that property in the area. We heard that from our last application as far as being adjacent to the horse center and not being able to build a horse barn, and they were literally adjacent to the horse center. So I did want to piggyback off that to do an amendment to it's my understanding per the Code of Virginia to do amendment to the comprehensive plan, such as a map amendment. The Board of Supervisors can propose that amendment, or they can instruct the Planning Commission to perform that amendment. So I think that's going to come up in the very near future. As everyone knows, the Planning Commission plays an advisory role. So I think we'll continue that conversation as we gear towards the Board of Supervisors public hearing sometime in January.
Thank you, Chris. At this time, we are going to open the public hearing. Is there anyone physically present who would like to speak?
There is no one signed up. Let me check and there's no one attending via online.
Okay, sounds good. So we are going to close the public hearing. And gentlemen, any thoughts? I like the fact that they're doing it is fine with me. The whole area is an ag area that just happened to get zoned residential, but they're surrounded by farms. It's like everybody's committed to the farming out there. Gentlemen, what thoughts?
I mean, your presentation was fantastic because, I mean, I had a bunch of questions from the application, and I think you addressed the primary one. I did even looked up the Shenandoah Valley Conservatory, and it talks about that they come and you come to agreement on the kitchen table. Did it actually happen at your kitchen table? I was wondering. Oh, okay. But anyway, I mean, the one thing I was concerned with is intent is one thing. I think you took it to the point where there's no question on the intent.
Everybody good?
Yeah.
I did have one question though. In the agenda item, it talks about the last few words with acceptance of potential proffers.
Yes,
What
we
is
do that. We did that with the Godfreys. It's my understanding that if we don't advertise it as a conditional rezoning, the Board of Supervisors does not have the ability to accept proffers, and that's something we always put in there. There are no proffers at this time.
Yeah, I think so. Okay.
Okay. I'd like to compliment you on your grass management. That is the cleanest hayfield that I wish mine looked that good, David. You got one that
I enjoy
clean?
taking that route out to Brownsburg too. So
Are any of those houses for sale up there on the hill? No.
All right.
I would take our Yankee visitors out there and show them what the Blue Ridge Mountains really look like.
All right, gentlemen, do we have a motion by anybody?
I make a motion to recommend to the Board of Supervisors that the rezoning of the properties that are located on the east side of Maury River Road, approximately 1.47 miles north of the intersection of Maury River Road, Route 39, and Alphen Lane, Route 750, identified as tax map 62-19-A, approximately 25.44 acres per tax records, and 62-19-B, 17.992 acres per tax records, from the general residential zoning district to the agricultural transitional zoning district be approved.
And I second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all very much.
So again, this is a recommendation, obviously, to the Board of Supervisors. The next, that we will do this, the notice of public hearing associated with the Board of Supervisors, either at their first meeting on January the 13th, or the 27th. So I'll be in touch with y'all on those dates. The 13th is a organizational meeting, and historically we've done the public hearings at the second meeting of the month, but we'll be in touch for sure and advertise accordingly, I should say.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is John Cooter, is that how it's pronounced? Just like, yeah. 189 Sulphur Springs Road, Natural Bridge, Virginia, 24578. Public hearing for the application for a special exception permit to continue to operate a commercial kennel in the agricultural and general uses A2 zoning district.
Yeah, so I've shared my screen. Again, Mr. Cooter has made an application to special exception permit to continue to operate a commercial kennel. It's my understanding, recently moved here, where they moved from did not have a B-pole tax, business license tax. And so that was the mechanism that brought this discussion to light. Met with them late October, sometime in November, something like that, and went over the process of being able to approve the zoning portion of the kennel license. So that's how we got here today. Property is located at 189 Sulphur Springs Road, owned by John Cooter and Cynthia Hunter, both in tents this evening, and is located on the east side of Sulphur Springs Road. Sulphur Springs Road is further identified as State Route 683, approximately 0.32 miles south of the intersection of Plank Road. Plank Road is further identified as 610 and Sulphur Springs Road. Property is located and surrounded in the agricultural and general use district, A2's district, of course, per section 603.03-5 of the regulations. A kennel is a use by special exception in the A2 zoning district. The property is further identified as tax map number 96-6-5D. And I just realized I had an error in my in the agenda item. I apologize. The property owners own two parcels of land. The first one being the applicant or the parcel that the application is associated with it. And again, that's 96-65D. And the second parcel is identified as 96-6-5D1. Total, both of those per tax records equal 8 acres. Usually we can do some deed research and figure out which one, either historical tax records or deed research to figure out, the various sizes, how we came up with the 8 acres. In fact, if I recall correctly, the deed calls for 8 acres and I think 148 poles, which is an old surveying term. So both parcels are over 8 acres. But throughout the process, I didn't think it'd be beneficial to include for either the county, if you will, or the applicant to include both parcels of land. As indicated in their written description of land, they're in the process of acquiring additional acreage to the south. In front of you, and let me grab these. In front of you, in the agenda item, I should say, you had some draft conditions, 1 through 4, and that did include some blanks as far as the breeding limited to what type of animals. And then number 3, the number of dogs associated with the breeding facility. With that, you also have a draft motion in front of you, draft motions, I should say, in front of you. And I've worked with the applicant to narrow down or include more unique information pertaining to what the desire is. With that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Mr. Cooter and Ms. Hunter to go over any questions or answer any questions the Planning Commission may have.
Good evening. Following Mr. Perkins, he did a great job. I'm going to try to do my best here.
You can do it.
Yeah, we have just two poodles at the moment. We don't plan on commercial kennel. Sounds kind of harsh, we don't have a ton of dogs. We raise them in our home, so we don't have outdoor kennels. We don't do any grooming or breeding or any boarding of other people's dogs. So it's just Cynthia, myself, and our 2 dogs that lay on the couch, but we do breed them. And once we moved from Pennsylvania to here, we realized we didn't have the room. So we retired and rehomed 2 of our dogs, which left us with 2. And I work part-time at W&L. She stays home all the time. And that's pretty much what we're trying to accomplish, is just to be able to do this right. Apparently, when I filed my taxes, then it sent something into Rockbridge County. And then I got a notice that I needed a county license. I had a retail store since 1991 in 4 different states. I wasn't aware of the county part, or we would already have gone through this. So that was just an overlook on my part. But that's what we're trying to accomplish, is just being able to continue breeding our 2 dogs, 1 to 3 litters a year, and have supplemental income.
So nothing on a commercial,
No.
not because I see where it's at like possible breeds, golden doodles, Bernedoodles.
Golden doodles, Bernedoodles,
Okay.
poodle to poodle, if we ever decided to do that, just a regular standard poodle or something, but mainly doodles. Yeah, just doodles.
Chris, should we talk about the fill-in items on items 1 through 4 now, so that, or
Yeah,
Now
it
would
would
be
be
a good
appropriate.
time.
And again, you
Yes,
you
yes.
did have some blanks on theirs. I did work with the applicant this afternoon, and in front of you, you have the draft motions that do include some of those blanks as we discussed, as the applicant has discussed, I should say.
oh, maybe I'm looking at the wrong one, Chris. But,
Yeah,
There's-
it's-
there's-
here's all that.
I mean,
okay, you got that. Okay.
But-
I
I think it's worth discussing some of them. I don't know if you've got something.
yeah.
Well, I'm saying, I mean, the first one, it says takes place inside the existing dwelling. I drove by the property there, and there's a second, there, you got 2, there's a couple buildings on the property. Is that right? Am I? Or not?
Yeah, there's the home, the firewood shed, the tool barn, which is where Piglet, she lives behind that. One of our little pigs lives behind that. And then we have turkeys in the other 2, and then my barn for my skid steer and all that. Yeah, no.
You're saying it's your house is where the dogs are normally?
Yeah, we have 3 bedrooms, so we just use a spare bedroom.
I mean, and the second one, I mean, I know you all discussed it. I mean, you are limiting it. I mean, obviously the poodles are both female, right?
Right.
Yes. I mean, I did a search today too, and there is, I don't know, hundreds of doodles. This does, I mean, I'm not sure anybody's going to care, but this does limit it. This second one limits it to,
Golden retrievers and Saint Bernards. That's what Bernedoodle, right? Saint Bernard.
Bernese Mountain Dog.
Bernese.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
And you-
typically what we focused on.
Did you want to be constrained by that? Is that
that's
what you're
the
asking?
point.
Do
Yeah,
you-
that's the
you
point.
want
Is
to
that
be
it was
constrained by that?
overdone it.
Yeah. Should you throw another dog in there? Just, it's more of a volume, not the type of dog. To us.
That's exactly right. Exactly.
Right, maybe
Sheepadoodle?
Cavaliers or Cavaliers.
I
Maybe
mean-
add King Charles Cavaliers, then we could have Cavapoos.
Have a food.
Yeah, why not? I mean, it's a volume to us. We don't care what kind of dog
Right.
it is. So,
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, when Chris asked us, I just mentioned the kind that we had,
Yeah,
that
I
we
mean,
have normally done.
I found one site that said 16 most popular doodles, and then another site that I think had
geez.
almost 50.
Yeah, all you gotta do
Right.
is go to the pet store in Stanton and there's a doodle for everything.
Different kind of doodle.
Yes.
And people like them because they're low
No,
shedding.
God,
Low shed
They're
and some
low
are
shed.
hyperallergenic.
Yeah, that's what brought us to the doodles to begin with. And they're sweet temperament. I mean,
Yes.
Now,
They're sweet.
the
They
type
won't
of
lay on
dog,
that.
I mean, are they all different sizes? Because I know you have minis, you have
We don't really do minis, more mediums.
medium size.
And medium to standard, but not everybody wants a huge dog.
Yeah.
is both of this, I don't know what this has to do with anything, but is both, it's got small and or standard. Are yours right now standards, both of them?
The 2 we have are standards.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
And
if you add any others, you're thinking possibly you would,
we were thinking maybe a smaller one. Again, we're limited on the size of the house, you know, we can't have too much in there, so. And then, basically, the studs are, you know, not ours. We rent a stud, so to say. Because we don't want to deal with the male dogs, you know, marking their territory and raising their leg and all that fun stuff, because they are in our home, so.
I'd recommend adding some breeds.
Yeah,
Just
it's-
not, just saying, I'll have to come back again if all of a sudden a certain breed becomes real popular and
Right,
you get requests for it.
Is there a way you could kind of make a
Oh,
blanket
yeah,
statement that
generic.
any poodle genetic? How about that? Or any
any
dog?
doodle or something.
We really
like-
don't care about the type of dog, do we, gentlemen?
In
Chris?
past applications, we have specified the type of dog, and some of that does have to do with, in most applications, all activities were not taking place in the home. They were run-ins
I
and
gotcha.
that
Okay.
type of thing. So to answer your question, in the past, we have specified what type of dog it is.
Follow you. Okay.
I have added to the draft conditions, golden doodles, poodles, small and or standard, golden doodles, bernedoodles, and or cavapoos.
Should that cover it?
Cover, yeah, that should, right, that should more than cover what we do.
Okay. We don't want to limit you. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Sheepadoodles.
Sheepadoodles?
I have a sheepdog. That's the reason I said that.
Yeah, the old English sheepdogs.
All right. Gentlemen, any other comments? Okay.
Uh,
At this time, we're going to open the public hearing. Chris, anybody here to physically present to speak?
No, I don't believe so. Let me check online. There are no attendees.
Okay, with no further comments, we are going to close the public hearing. So I think we've discussed it. Gentlemen,
I'm good.
it's good.
Yeah.
Have a motion, maybe?
I make a motion to recommend to the Board of Supervisors that the special exception permit to John Cooter to develop and operate a kennel dog breeding business in the agricultural and general uses A2 zoning district per LDR 603.03-5 on the east side of Sulphur Springs Road, Route 683, identified as tax map number 96-6-5D, be approved with the following conditions. Number one, all breeding, raising, and caring for dogs shall take place in the existing dwelling, which is 189 Sulphur Springs Road, Natural Bridge, Virginia, 24578. Number two, breeding shall be limited to poodles, small and or standard, golden doodles, bernedoodles, and or cavapoos. Number three, limited to 4 female dogs and 1 male dog for breeding, which shall include any visiting stud dogs. And number four, boarding and grooming operations shall be prohibited.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Uh,
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Oh,
All right.
one last thing. I want to acknowledge that we received a letter from Emily, I think she pronounces it Feister, just so note that we did receive that communication.
Thank you.
Okay.
And again, this is a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. That recommendation will be forwarded along either at their January 13th meeting or tentatively January 13th meeting, or tentatively the 27th of January. So we'll be in touch, and we'll of course do the notice of public hearing accordingly.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
You too. You
Thank
too. Chris, zoning text amendments discussion.
Yes. So we, Mr. Dryden and I, along with assistance from Penny Patterson and a Washington Lee law student, have started the discussion of zoning text amendments, based on some of the discussion we've had in years past. And the first immediate thing that we've talked about is it most located in Rockbridge County. The land development regulations, which is the subdivision and zoning ordinance, is actually appendix to the county code. What we found in the direct localities around us, if you will, were sort of out of the normal. That it was, I think it was Amherst and Nelson County are the ones that are the only ones that we were found in the immediate area, if you will. Well, that's not, that was pretty far reaching as far as it's more commonly to incorporate it as a chapter of the county code. And so, it'd be chapter 28 and 29, whatever it may be. And so that's more of administrative than what we would be dealing with as far as zoning text amendments. But I want to keep you up to date or fill you in on that discussion. And if I recall correctly, we got some draft today already of that. And so I think the Board of Supervisors, Mr. Dryden, gave the report to the Board of Supervisors at the Monday meeting as well on that process that we're working towards. Immediately starting in January sometime, and we're going to talk about this tonight, the immediate zoning text amendment that we've been working on for a while now. It has been sitting for a little bit, and we're planning to doing it sometime in January, is obviously the solar ordinance. Y'all are aware of the draft solar ordinance. So depending on the level of applications we have, I'm going to propose, or see the availability, I should say, of other members of the solar committee and members of the Board of Supervisors to do that on our regularly scheduled planning commission evening, either a work session. As of right now, we don't have any pending special exceptions or rezoning applications that I know of, and we'll know more essentially mid-month. And so if it is a light agenda, with y'all's permission, we can host that joint.
I think that's a great idea, Chris.
Perfect. Didn't know if anybody was out of town, in town, or anywhere in between.
What's the date?
That date is going to be January the 8th is the next regular scheduled planning commission.
What'd you say?
So when I start my leave.
There you go. Perfect. Adam will have 4 weeks to dive into this, solely dive into this, I should say. Yeah. So that's the immediate need. The other ones that we've talked about in the past are mobile restaurants are going to be on the list. In my opinion, as staff, if you will, I think we need to better define special event venues, and then make modifications to the short-term rental regulations that we have. And then lastly, I think there's needed revisions to the shooting range ordinance, or definition, I should say, that we have. With that being said, I think the solar ordinance is going to keep us busy for the first, I won't say quarter, but certainly till March of 2025, I would assume. And that would be, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go through that. And so I think, as far as staff goes, I think that's the immediate one we will be going towards, with those others coming in the very near future.
It'll be good to get started.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I stated before, there's a lot of revisions that, in my opinion, there's a lot of revisions, updates, and modifications that need to be done to the subdivision and more zoning ordinance than subdivision ordinance. But I have identified some in the subdivision ordinance as well. But again, in the immediate future, I think those handful of ones that will keep us busy. Let's put it that way.
But can they be done? I mean, you have to have hearings, right?
On all of them, yes, sir. On
Individual hearings, so it's going to be open, close,
They're
or
gonna
is it
take a
gonna
while. Some of those are going to take a long time to discuss. I know what you're saying. We can't group them.
you can't group them.
well,
Well, no, no, actually you could, but I think on some cases, for example, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to have the solar ordinance grouped in with everything else.
No, I agree with that one, but yeah,
I
I
think-
mean,
I think
we could
some-
rank them or determine.
Yeah, I would expect that there's going to be several maybe technical corrections where we're just changing a few words here and there, which would be appropriate to put all together.
Right.
And then there's going to be some substantive ones,
yes.
which really probably would need their own public hearing to make sure they're fully vetted by the
Okay, I
public.
mean, but
That would be my guess. Chris, as we go through this process,
Would make the
probably have
recommendations on
on that.
the changing it from the current appendix to a chapter, what does that entail? I'm assuming that nothing's changed.
Well, even if nothing's changed, it still would have to go through a public hearing process because we'd be amending the ordinance by removing the appendix, which is
Right.
titled a regulation. And when in reality, it's not a regulation, it's an ordinance. And then we'd be adding chapters to the county code.
Now, would we see that being complicated in terms of input, hearing
Oh,
input?
well, I don't imagine that'd be too complicated. I mean, we tasked Penny just less than a week ago with putting everything together and organizing it, and she came back with drafts today.
Well,
which
but
I
will
haven't had a
people
chance to look
think
at.
it's an opportunity to?
Oh, well, I think that's going to always be an opportunity.
I mean,
But I think just my personal view on this, I think things like the solar ordinance are going to attract quite a bit more public
Right.
interest and
No,
comments.
I'm trying to
structure.
figure out how to rank.
Yeah, Chris,
Order
you can
them.
group a couple of them together. Do it.
Sure. And we'll have time. I hate to say it like that, but we will certainly have time because the first and foremost, as you know, is the solar ordinance. So with that being said,
But I think I'm not getting good with my point. My point is that do we need to get the appendix to chapter changed first before we?
No, it's that the order of how it's done, I think is best. I'll defer to Chris on how he thinks the best way to.
Okay, so that could
organize and
actually be
run that.
last.
But it could go last, it could go first, it
I
could
mean, I
go
hate
anywhere
the
because.
fact that somebody worked on something that we.
Oh,
we
no,
could
no,
possibly-
I think, no, we're going into this at the very beginning of this process, and it's just that Penny Patterson, who is my paralegal, is just an excellently organized person who works really hard, and we asked her to start doing something, she's already brought first version out, which I'm sure will need some more additions and changes and works on it, but we're on the ground running with it, but I don't Chris and I, when we discussed it, anticipate this could take several months, if not a year, before the whole thing's done with. But
Okay.
we don't expect it to be done next month.
So, I
and
mean,
in my opinion, it's half dozen, six other. I mean, either, we will work at the same pace that we will do regardless of where we are with the county code, the incorporating it actually in a chapter in the county code, and it will be where we are at that time. And so let's say the solar ordinance is done and it's incorporated in the land development regulations, then that would just be carried over. So I don't foresee, they would be, I think the cleanest way to do it is zero changes wherever with the land development regulations are. It would be zero changes at the point where we take it from the appendix and incorporate it actually in a chapter, regardless if we're through the solar process or any of these other zoning text amendments we're talking about, or vice versa. Let's say we are ready to go through the county code and do that public hearing and make it actual chapter. Then we're just working with essentially a different format than we're accustomed to with the land development regulations.
all right, I'm just trying to think, I mean, because I'm trying to think of the best order to have these in. It sounds like to me, the solar ordinance is probably number one.
I believe so. Yes. I mean,
Okay.
that's based on direction I've
So
gotten
would
from
second
others.
be then incorporating changing that and then work the zoning text amendments after that?
It really depends on where we are and where Ms. Patterson is in the process, where we are in the process.
Well, I
of
think
getting-
the solar ordinance is going to be several months and you're already kind of admitting that she's a good worker and that we probably.
But the one thing to keep in mind, she is a very good worker, but there's a lot of things to do because she's done a wonderful job. If you look at our county code, most counties actually pay an external service provider. The Muni code is usually to handle everything. Ours is done completely by Penny, and it's very well organized. We have hyperlinks everywhere into it, and that's all done by ourselves. So that would all have to be put into this once we get comfortable with the format and what language has. For example, if you look at the LDR right now, if you look even in the definition section, some of the definitions deal with subdivision, some of the definitions deal with zoning. Those are going to have to be pulled out to the separate chapters. If you read through the language in the LDR, there's places with references to subdivisions throughout the chapter, and that will have to be pulled out. So there's a good bit of work that still has to be done, but she's a very hard worker. But then it comes to me to review, and Chris. But for me, speaking for myself, I'm not as fast as she is, and I want to make sure it's done right. And so I don't want to give the impression that we're going to be ready to go with it quickly. I'm just saying that we're working on it hard right now, and we're not going to be delayed by getting things organized. So I think from your point of view, for the substantive issues, I wouldn't delay substantive issues waiting for this to be done, because the process for recodification of it will happen as we're
So
preparing.
other than the solar, what's the substitute, can you
The
rank?
ones we mentioned this evening are the definition and regulations, if you will, ordinance pertaining to short-term rentals, wedding events, special event venues. We've talked a little bit about mobile restaurants. And then the last one we talked about this evening was the shooting range definition, outdoor shooting range.
These are all
definition.
definitions which we're working on, right?
It would be definitions. Yeah, they would still be they would still be the uses by special exception or permitted uses, whatever it may be, but it's modifying and, in my opinion, improving those definitions. For example, the short-term rental, when we did it the first time, we used the tax code, and looking back, that was, in my opinion, an error, because obviously tax codes want to capture everything where that's not the purpose of zoning. And so it would be, in my opinion, a better definition.
I like to check them off, and if we can do a bunch of them at one time, that would be good. And that's why I'm just,
I think the solar ordinance is going to keep us busy for till March, something like that. But we can certainly get the list, and even next time I can put this back on and back up a little bit. We were supposed to have a zoning text amendment, you may know, zoning text amendment public hearing this evening associated with private schools in the business zone. I failed to advertise that, so that's coming down the pipeline in January with y'all. But short of that, I think once we get that done, the solar ordinance will be first and foremost, and then move on to the.
but I mean, I would make the recommendation is that one can be pushed back. I mean, the only reason I think I may have been the one that brought that up is that, that we had that problem where we had to change zoning, and we were trying to correct that. I mean, it's an easy correction, I think.
Yeah. And we could have, if I would have not failed to advertise it, we would have done it this evening. So those are ones I think we will continue with that for sure. And I appreciate your point, because if that is the only public hearing we have, well, if it's the only public hearing we have, we still may do it in January.
But we could also do other definitions. I mean, do other.
I don't think staff times will allow for much time other than the solar ordinance to answer your question.
No. I see three things. What legal's working on.
Yeah, but what y'all really won't be part of, you'll be part of the end result, but that's going to be the administrative side of things.
Right, and then the solar ordinance.
Yes.
And then there's this bin of small zoning text amendments, primarily definitions that you're talking about.
Yes.
So you were proposing that we would have done one today.
The business and
My question is, why wouldn't we have done three today?
Well, the other ones are more complicated than the business zone, the private schools in the business zone.
For instance, special, how we go around about special events, that definition is going to try to.
I have not looked at any of them. That's why I'm trying to.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what I need to look at in what order. That's what I mean.
Like when we were doing the country store, we did that earlier in the year. The amount of staff work they do, he pulls from different localities to give us a broader definition of what other localities are using. And then from there, we make our recommendations. So when you're throwing them all together, just the amount of man hours they have to get everything ready to go for us.
It might be 30, 40 items in the definition.
Okay, I'm just saying, I cannot, I mean, right now I know the one sounds easy.
The private schools is already
There's
defined.
none that easy. There's no other ones that easy.
Not that we've talked about tonight. Not that we've talked about tonight.
Well, I'm just saying, it's an opportunity to get them off the plate.
Absolutely.
I mean, the point about the staff, and I'm gonna paraphrase, I watched the hearing last night. I think it was during the discussion you all had at the end, and Supervisor Ayer did talk about the staff and what we're doing to the staff. And one of the things I did in that email that I sent to a lot of the people is I recommended, is there any way with the solar ordinance that we can get some support with a consultant somewhere and take some of that burden off the staff, a lot of that work, and utilize some expertise outside.
And that is certainly a process. It's an RFP process, which is then, of course, request for proposals, I should say, RFP.
I know how the government, the federal government works. I don't know
Yes.
necessarily how this works.
And we'll see how the discussion goes. We'll see how the solar discussion goes. And I think that will be better addressed during or after our joint work session.
We'll learn about how.
And I'm wholeheartedly, we were planning to do that in January 2025. Right. Need to make sure everyone can join and where we're going to host.
You're talking about the planning commission plus those that on the
solar committee and the board of supervisors.
and the board of supervisors.
Yes. Which that was the original plan from the very beginning, and through conversations that might get bottled down, if you will, to the planning commission solar ordinance. But I do know the members of the board of supervisors are very interested in it. So the current game plan is to have everyone sit down at the beginning. That's just to say to unveil the draft solar ordinance, if you will, and then go over some of the questions or comments that you have made to via email, obviously, to the about the solar.
That was just, I mean, the warm solar thing to me was pretty traumatic, and I wanted to write down all the things that I learned through that.
Sure.
And I mean, to me, there's besides what's written in the draft solar ordinance, there's a lot of other options. I mean, a moratorium on solar is an option. I don't know that anyone's going to go for that, but it's an option. Keeping things the way they are right now with special exceptions. We might have 25 conditions next time. So, I mean, there's a wide range, and I'm just kind of concerned that we're kind of locking ourselves in. And, if we're doing a solar ordinance, then there's a lot of detail that I think is, still needs to be discussed.
Yeah, and that's absolutely the
And
first
having
and
a group of
foremost,
that,
the reason for the joint sessions. Absolutely.
having a group of 10 plus people, I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure we're ready for a meeting, but I'll be there.
Being ready for the meeting, that's why it's a starter meeting. If you look at it that way, we'll air this out, the same discussion we'll have as you're starting right now, and then get a game plan from there. The solar ordinance is typical in that it has to be approved by the PC before the board does it. So it's going to end up coming back to us even after all the
No,
national teeth here.
I realize.
Yes.
The other
Yeah.
say, and
Yeah.
it'll be a long meeting when that's a public hearing.
I mean, again, one final comment as far as what we've been through with the warm solar. We had a vote here 3-2. We had the supervisors vote 3-2. We need some kind of guidance that makes it 4-1 or 5-0. One way or the other. And I mean, I think we're still far from that.
Understood.
Okay, is that it for the zoning text amendments discussion, Chris?
That is, yes, sir. On my end, yes, sir.
Okay, gentlemen, any comments?
See,
Yep.
meeting Monday, you said.
Yes,
Development is Monday at 12:15,
yes.
so Leslie can get there.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, any other
One
discussion?
procedural question. Do we normally approve the 2025 meeting schedule in December prior to, or
January
Is
usually,
it
and it
January?
includes
And then
the
the
following
the
January meeting. So,
officers?
so our current, the one we adopted in January of 2024,
through January 25?
it does, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that will be on the next agenda. The election of officers, the electronic meeting policy, which y'all have done a few months ago, but to keep us on track and annual renewal, we're going to renew that in January as well, moving forward. Election of officers, scheduling, that type of thing.
What was the meeting you just talked about? I'm sorry, I went to check my notes and
Mr. Kramer is asking about the Office Community Development Committee meeting. And that's held usually in this room on the third Monday of the month at it used to be 12 o'clock, but we've moved it to 12:15.
And that's two of us and two of the board.
Yes,
Chris
and then staff essentially.
Staff too. So
who's the two from us? You and
Yeah,
Bob?
Mr. Kramer, yeah.
And they don't give us lunch.
Ha.
got to beg for water. All right. Other comments, gentlemen?
Make a move that we adjourn.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those
Thank you.
opposed?